On the morning of May 12th, 2017, computers across the world began locking themselves. Hospital terminals, factory workstations, train station systems, office desktops, machines that had worked the day before suddenly displayed the same red warning screen. Files were encrypted. Access was gone. A countdown clock was running. The message was simple: pay in Bitcoin or lose your data. This was WannaCry. But this was not just another computer virus. This was the moment ransomware escaped the back office and entered the real world. It interrupted medical care. It halted businesses. It exposed fragile infrastructure. And it showed the world that a single cyber attack could move faster than many organizations could respond. I'm looking back at WannaCry not as a technical curiosity, but as a warning. Because behind every infected computer was a bigger question. How did so many systems become vulnerable at the same time? The first reports came quickly. Security teams saw machines going down. Help desks were flooded. Screens showed ransom notes in multiple languages. The malware did not wait for a person to click every link. It moved like a worm, scanning for vulnerable systems and spreading across networks. At the center of the outbreak was a flaw in Microsoft Windows networking, specifically SMB, a protocol used for file and printer sharing. A patch had already been released. That detail matters. WannaCry was not unstoppable because nobody knew the door existed. It spread because the door had been left open on too many machines, and once inside, it did what ransomware does best. It encrypted files, demanded payment, and created panic. But unlike ordinary ransomware, WannaCry could keep moving. That made it different. That made it dangerous. The clearest human impact came from the United Kingdom's National Health Service. Inside hospitals and clinics, the attack was not abstract. Appointments were disrupted. Systems became unavailable. Staff had to fall back on manual processes. Some services were forced to divert patients. The crisis was no longer about malware samples or network traffic. It was about doctors, nurses, patients, and time. Imagine a hospital where the computers do not simply crash. They ask for ransom. That image changed how people understood cyber risk. For years, cybersecurity had been treated as an IT problem, something for specialists, something in a server room. WannaCry made it visible. It showed that a cyber failure could become an operational failure, and in healthcare, operational failure can become human risk. That was the point when ransomware stopped feeling like a nuisance and started looking like a public safety issue. To understand why WannaCry moved so quickly, you have to understand EternalBlue. EternalBlue was an exploit targeting a vulnerability in Microsoft's SMB implementation. It allowed attackers to remotely execute code on vulnerable Windows systems. That meant an attacker did not need to sit at the keyboard. They did not need permission. They needed a reachable, vulnerable machine. The exploit had reportedly come from a leak of advanced cyber tools. That made WannaCry especially alarming. This was not just criminal ransomware. It was ransomware powered by a weaponized exploit. A tool designed for intrusion had been dropped into the public ecosystem, and criminals had attached it to a ransom machine. The result was chaos. A vulnerability became an exploit became a worm became a global incident. Microsoft had already released a security update before the outbreak. That is one of the most important facts in this story. The fix existed, but many systems had not applied it. Why? Because patching is harder than it sounds. Large organizations have old software, legacy systems, fragile dependencies, maintenance windows, approval processes, and machines nobody wants to reboot. In theory, cybersecurity is simple. Patch the vulnerability. In reality, organizations often do not know every system they own. They do not know which machines are exposed. They do not know which devices are unsupported. And sometimes, they know the risk but delay the fix because operations cannot stop. WannaCry exposed the distance between having a patch and being protected. That distance became the danger zone. Then came an unexpected turn. A security researcher analyzing WannaCry noticed that the malware reached out to a strange unregistered domain name. He registered the domain, and suddenly the spread began to slow. That domain acted like a kill switch. It did not clean infected machines. It did not undo the damage, but it disrupted the malware's ability to continue spreading in the same way. For a moment, the world caught its breath. The most famous ransomware outbreak of its time had been slowed by a discovery that almost sounded accidental. But the lesson was not that we got lucky. The lesson was that the world had been depending on luck. WannaCry forced organizations to rethink ransomware. Before WannaCry, many executives saw ransomware as a local problem, a few infected machines, a bad email, a backup restore. After WannaCry, the conversation changed. Ransomware became a board-level issue. Patch management became a crisis function. Asset inventory became a security requirement. Network segmentation became a survival strategy. Backups became business continuity. Incident response became a leadership responsibility. The attack also changed how defenders thought about speed. Cybersecurity was no longer just about stopping an attacker from getting in. It was about limiting how far they could move once something went wrong. Because WannaCry showed that one exposed service could become a global chain reaction. Years later, WannaCry still matters because the conditions that made it possible have not disappeared. Organizations still run legacy systems, patching still gets delayed, asset inventories are still incomplete, critical services still depend on old infrastructure, and attackers still look for the gap between what is known and what is fixed. WannaCry was not the end of ransomware. It was the beginning of the modern ransomware era. It showed that cyber attacks could disrupt hospitals, businesses, transportation, and governments. It showed that technical debt could become public risk, and it showed that cybersecurity is not only about protecting data, it is about protecting the systems people depend on. So when we look back at that red ransom screen, we should not see only a piece of malware. We should see a warning. The next global cyber crisis may not begin with an explosion, a siren, or a breaking news alert. It may begin with a frozen screen, a locked file, and a countdown clock.